Really looking forward to today's show as we talk about the top 12 and the consensus PPR rankings. Who made the cut? Did Christian McCaffrey make the cut? Did Ashton Genty make the cut? Who's number one? Is it a running back or a wide receiver? Who should it be? We'll talk about that with the three guys who do the rankings. Dave, Jamie, and Heath. Guys, we're having a heat wave up here in New York. Where do you think it's hotter? My place or your place?
You're not wearing long sleeves today, so I'm going to guess your place.
I would guess it's hotter. Go ahead, Dave.
Do you have like crazy humidity where you walk outside and immediately your back begins to sweat?
haven't been outside yet, but today is going to be 95. Tomorrow, 97. It's really crazy up here.
I was going to say at 10 a.m., I would guess it's hotter in Florida because it's just not cooling off here. No. But I wouldn't be surprised if 3 or 4. That's the thing that I realized when I moved down here is it doesn't actually get as hot in South Florida as it does in Kansas City.
Right.
Like Kansas City will have a week of 100 degrees or more almost every year. Here we got the nice sea breeze. It's just beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, you know what's hot? PPR rankings, baby. Yes. Okay, so a few quick questions about the consensus top 12, and I'll go ahead and read that top 12 right now. It's Bijan Robinson, Ja'Marr Chase, Justin Jefferson, Saquon Barkley, CeeDee Lamb, Jahmyr Gibbs. So in the top 6, you have a nice little split of 3 running backs and 3 receivers. Bijan, Chase, Jefferson, Barkley, Lamb, Gibbs. Neighbors is 7th. Puka is 8th. Devon Achane is 9th. Ashton Genty is 10th. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 11th. And Christian McCaffrey, 12th. That is 6 running backs and 6 wide receivers. Again, 7 through 12 are Neighbors, Nakua, Achane, Genty, St. Brown, McCaffrey. Not in here, but just behind would be Nico Collins, A.J. Brown, Brian Thomas Jr., Derrick Henry, and the tight ends, etc. First question. Ja'Marr Chase scored 40 more PPR fantasy points than any other non-quarterback last season. How much does that matter? He's number 2 in the consensus rankings, but Jamie, you actually have him first.
I mean, it matters. I think he showed, last year how good he is when Joe Burrow is healthy. And, as we've talked about quite a bit, I know Dave has certainly been adamant about how bad the Bengals defense will be once again. So there's a lot to love about the entire situation for the Cincinnati offense and especially the Cincinnati passing game. And so I know we're all in agreement that Bijan's the number 1 running back. I think the fantasy community is split, if not more in the favor of Saquon Barkley. For me, Chase is has just as much upside. And as we know, I think historically, Adam has sort of found some research that maybe suggests otherwise, but receivers a little bit more safer than running backs from a health standpoint. In any event, I think Ja'Marr Chase has a chance to repeat as the number 1 non-quarterback and have another dominant season. And now he's pissed off after this whole plane thing. There's going to be another huge season coming for Ja'Marr Chase.
So you're mentioning research that wide receivers being safer than running backs didn't have anything really to do with health specifically. It was just I looked at the top. No, it was just finish. I looked at the top 12 in ADP and did they finish top 12? And this is over, 6 years. I don't know that I have it updated, but last year running back was so much better than receiver. Running backs drafted as top 12 guys have a higher hit rate than wide receivers over, I'll see if I can find it, 6-7 years, I think, at this point. So that's what it was. It wasn't necessarily injuries. It was just either injuries or performance. Running backs had been safer picks. I don't have it broken down as, the very first one or the top 5 picks in the draft, but basically through the first 2 rounds or so. Sorry. Okay. So Ja'Marr Chase is number 1 for Jamie. He's number 2 for Dave and Heath. And overall, he is number 2 in the consensus rankings. Second question. Heath, who was the toughest player to rank in the top 12 for you? I'll get all of you guys on this one.
It's probably Ashton Genty because we've never seen him play football and we're just anointing him as a top 12 pick immediately. And I think I'm the highest on him, but it's not just Genty and translating his skill set to the NFL, but it's also a brand new offensive system in Las Vegas that we at least haven't seen this iteration of yet. And so I think between the questions about Chip Kelly and the questions about the Raiders offensive line and the questions about a rookie coming into the NFL, there's plenty of reason to have a wide range of places to rank Genty. It's just that range is probably from 5 to 15, which is still really awesome because he's really awesome.
Dave, toughest player to rank for you in the top 12?
Genty is outside of my top 12, and I don't know how long I can keep it that way because the guy who is in my top 12 that's tough to rank is Christian McCaffrey, 29 years old, coming off of a really disappointing year where we were taking him as the 101. If he were easy to rank and we were so confident in his ability and so confident in his workload and what he could do, he wouldn't be toward the back end of round one. It's a miracle he's in round one because of what he did to fantasy managers last year and what he's done to fantasy managers in the past. I'm a little concerned that the 49ers are going to scale back his workload at least through the first half, if not the first 2/3 of the season, because they want to have him ready to go for a playoff run, or when they need him, maybe they're fighting for a wild card spot. Who knows how the season will unfold for the 49ers, but they're going to want to save him for when they really, really need him. And it makes me a little bit nervous about getting him on my team as fast as possible. Adam, I know you've talked about taking him as soon as 3rd overall. I don't want to take him that early because I'm worried about the downside and the floor being potentially 0. And B, I don't think I have to because there are other players, especially at wide receiver, that are safer and have maybe not the same upside as Christian McCaffrey, but still good enough upside where I won't feel like my first-round pick is a loss if they go out there, these receivers go out there, these other running backs go out there, and they average in the neighborhood of 18 PPR points per game. That's not McCaffrey's ceiling. We know McCaffrey's ceiling is higher, but we know his floor is lower, particularly because of how frail he might be at this point in his life.
Jamie, toughest player to rank?
It's more from a placement than he's obviously going to be in the top 12, but it's Barkley. Just knowing that he was amazing last year and should have the chance if he stays healthy to be amazing. But I mean, the numbers that he's working against are just so scary. The total touches, the history of 2,000-yard running backs, the fact that he's a year older, coming off all that workload. And so the environment is still great. Aside from the missed touchdowns, what did he lose? 11 rushing touchdowns last year because Jalen Hurts stole them from him. So that there's the potential for that if he gets a few more opportunities or falls forward another foot or two for him to maybe increase his touchdown total. But over 450 total touches when you factor into playoffs. There's been 9 2,000-yard rushers. The average decline in yards has been over 500 the following season. 2 of those 8, he's the 9th. 2 of those previous 8 got hurt in Terrell Davis and Derrick Henry. And so I'm just so concerned about Barkley finishing the season. And I hate to think that way because you never want to factor in, okay, if this guy gets hurt, especially if he's not coming off an injury, but it's just so much on his body for him to have to do that again and do it at that level again. And so, I'm obviously taking a risk not having him as the number 1 running back. I think, again, we're all in the same boat. But even not having him as a top 3, top 5 overall player, I think he's 6 for me. So, yeah, it's not fun when you see everybody draft Saquon Barkley, in some cases 1st overall, 2nd overall, and that you're basically out on him for as good as he was last year.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley, so 4th overall in our consensus rankings in full PPR, and he only had 33 catches in 16 games. And I figure if the Eagles throw a little bit more, that should make everyone have some more catches. Yeah, what was I going to say? He is RB1 in I'm looking at Fantasy Pros PPR rankings, PPR ADP. Their PPR ADP right now on Fantasy Pros has Chase 1, Jefferson 2, Saquon Barkley 3, Bijan Robinson 4, then Lamb and Gibbs. It is the same top 6. In fact, it's the same top 8, but just a different order. Same 8 players, different order. Okay. Nobody said Jahmyr Gibbs. I think you can make the case that he is tough to rank because he averaged 18. What did he average? 18 something, like 18.8 PPR fantasy points per game before the David Montgomery injury. He was RB6 per game in full PPR. After the Montgomery injury, he was obviously incredible, but that's 2 years in a row where we have that kind of data. Malik Neighbors being 7th overall, ahead of Puka Nacua, 1 spot ahead. Really? What, are you kidding me? That's what?
Targets and touchdowns, baby.
Targets and touchdowns, yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, Neighbors might have, I'm probably going to say this and then see somebody else, but like the biggest quarterback upgrade of any wide receiver in the top 20.
And he still doesn't have a quarterback as good as what Puka Nacua has. And by the way, if you take out, if you look at the games where Nacua had a snap share of 75% or higher, Nacua was on pace for 189 targets. If you just want to remove week 1, where Nacua left with an injury, he was on pace for 173 targets. Yes, Neighbors was on pace for more than that, but I can't guarantee you that Neighbors is going to be on pace for more than 173 targets. I don't know that. I know they're back to back. But
so the difference between the Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Tim Boyle, and who's the other one? Tommy DeVito, and what they have now is not worth 1 fantasy point per game.
Oh, I would hope so.
Well, he was less than a fantasy point per game behind Puka last year, and Puka
left one game early with an injury. He left one game early with an ejection.
Didn't Neighbors leave a game with a concussion?
I believe so.
Late in the fourth quarter. And Puka had a better rookie season than Neighbors. Puka's amazing. Puka, I don't know. That one just jumped out. I just wanted to have this little argument.
So the Giants fan is going to take Puka over Neighbors.
Puka Nacua had the second highest yard per route run in like the last 12 years or something like that. He also had a much higher target. I mean, we want to talk about targets. Malik Neighbors was second in the NFL. Target per route run rate, 31%. Puka Nacua was 38.3%. That will not happen again.
Not if he runs more routes.
No, it won't happen. He will not be that high. So, but I just want to point that out, that even if you look at Neighbors' best stat, which was target per route run rate, Puka Nacua was 7% better than him in that. So, all right. Anyway,
I think that's the fun part of the draft, though, like the debate that you're going to have with Neighbors, Puka, and I think it's going to be St. Brown, probably more so than Nico or AJ Brown, just what fantasy managers are going to debate, the consistency of what St. Brown has done versus the new addition to the Rams offense, Devontae Adams, maybe lowering the value for Puka a little bit, and obviously Malik Neighbors. And then you have the potential, the Bijan Barkley debate, when, who's going to go maybe first overall of those guys. And then you throw in probably the Achane, McCaffrey, Derrick Henry debate that people are going to have to, decide on, which of those, Genti as well, those 4 running backs, which one do you like the best? It's fun. It's not like it's a clear cut, like these guys should go 1 or 2, 3 or 4, 5 or 6. Like, I think once you get past probably the consensus 6, then it becomes a lot of question marks. But even in those first 6, you might have a question or 2.
I think we should do a podcast about this.
No, I mean, right. I don't think there's an easy pick. I don't think there's one non-debatable pick. It's not like the years where Christian McCaffrey was coming off a year where he scored 28, 29 fantasy points per game. It was so obviously the number 1 pick. You can make a case. How many players, this will be my last question, bonus 4th question. How many players would you make the case for as the number 1? Now you say, I could see the reason why you would take him number 1 overall in full PPR.
2.
Just say 2, Heath. Don't be difficult.
Sure, 2. I didn't hear the question.
Okay.
You're still a Barkley guy, though, right?
Well, let me say the question for Heath. The question was, how many players could you justify as the number 1 overall pick?
Oh, I think you could justify Bijan, Chase. You could justify Barkley if you just want to disregard the workload from last year. So 3. And that's probably it.
Okay.
That's actually 1 quarterback. Weeks.
See, we had a couple of polls in here. We had, who was your number 1 overall pick in PPR for 2025? Chase has 67% of the vote. Bijan 20%. Barkley 8%. Jefferson 3%. Had 121 votes there. Now we have a new poll. Who are you taking in PPR, Puka Nacua or Malik Neighbors? I'm going to vote for Puka, and it is 50-50 right now. Oh, it is 7 votes, 15 votes. Puka slightly ahead. All right, we'll take a quick break here. Just a few news items, and then we'll start debating even more the top 12 in full PPR. All right, welcome back, everybody. So just one order of business here. Going into 2024, this was the note that I had. I looked at 2020 through 2023, compared the top 12 running backs in ADP to the top 12 wide receivers in ADP. Running backs that were drafted top 12 finished top 12 56.3% of the time in those 4 seasons. Wide receivers finished top 12 52% of the time. So a little bit better at running back, but not much. However, I arbitrarily picked 14 PPR fantasy points per game. Top 12 ADP running backs, top 80 running backs who were top 12 in ADP. How many of them averaged 14 or more PPR fantasy points per game compared to wide receivers? 75% of running backs over those 4 years hit that number, 14 or more PPR fantasy points. 65% of wide receivers did. That actually really stood out to me. So that's why I thought that the data showed that running backs were safer than wide receivers. And this does not include last year, when I would almost guarantee that the running backs were better than the wide receivers, the ones drafted in the top 12.
I think you should redo the study based on end of season, because the reason that people say running backs aren't safer is because, rightly or wrongly, people believe running backs miss more games due to injury, and the per game would not factor that in.
Yeah, okay, but the finishing top 12 would, and running backs had a slight edge over wide receivers there. I just think that we should get out of the mindset that wide receivers are safer than running backs. I don't really see any data except the 2023 season, which was horrible for running backs, to support that, really.
Standpoint or production standpoint?
From the standpoint of drafted in as a top 12 player at the position, finishing as a top 12 player at the position. I don't have a breakdown of injuries. I do think running backs get hurt a little bit more. But I mean,
well, the other side of it is, like the argument hasn't just been that running backs are more likely to get hurt, but also more starters emerge at running back off the waiver wire than wide receivers.
Yes.
Yeah, that could I mean, that could be true also. You do get some kind of league winning wide receivers drafted in rounds, I want to say 7 through 9. Again, this is all research that I have done for previous years. I don't know if I've updated it, but every year we get wide receivers in that range that kill it. Who would it have been last year? Like 2 years ago, it was like Brandon Ayuk and Mike Evans. Oh, sorry, say that again.
McConkey was one of those guys. That
Brian Thomas, Jerry Jeudy.
Brian Thomas
these
Jr.
I think they were even later than that.
Yeah, right. But that's the point, is that you can draft wide receivers later on. You can draft any position later on and hit on them. Bowers at tight end, Jaden Daniels at quarterback. We can find examples at every single position. It's easier at wide receiver, partially because every team uses 3 wide receivers week in and week out. So you just have to find the team that's got that wide receiver that's kind of overlooked on draft day, who has the upside to be, Brian Thomas Jr., Ladd McConkey, exactly who we were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's go to the news and notes. Anthony Richardson. His name, sorry, I stumbled through his name there. His name is Anthony Richardson. Said he'll be available for training camp after hurting his shoulder. Brian Dable not concerned about Malik Neighbors' availability for training camp. Meanwhile, third-year wide receiver Jalen Hyatt suffered a minor leg injury for the Giants. And Tayshaun Reed, I'm sorry if I'm saying that name, writer for The Athletic. I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong. I did say the name. Writer for The Athletic thinks the Raiders will use Raheem Mostert as the primary third down back. Does that mean anything to you guys?
Not really.
No.
Okay. Heath, what's coming up on FFT Dynasty?
Well, on Friday we did guys that I hate. I think tomorrow we're going to do guys that I love. Just another way to talk about guys that I'm lower and higher than on consensus, but I decided to lean into what everybody says when I talk about being lower on somebody. So we just called it guys I hate.
Will the thumbnail for the guys you love be just as amusing as the thumbnail for the guys you hate?
We'll see. Have to see what Harry can work up. He did a fantastic job on Friday.
Have you guys seen Jamie?
You guys should go look at that thumbnail and then click it on the YouTube page and
photoshopping Heath's eyebrows and giving him, what is that on your forehead? Is that like a tattoo?
I'm not sure.
Like an angry emoji.
Oh yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah,
it's very amusing.
I'm just happy it wasn't a picture of me as the thumbnail.
Yeah,
for that episode.
Oh, what's today's thumbnail? So you have to talk about.
Oh, today's thumbnail is Tyreek Hill. No, it's Bijan Robinson. Let's get right to Bijan Robinson, who's in the top 12 as number 1 in the consensus rankings. So, Dave, why do you think Bijan Robinson is the CBS RB1 and Saquon Barkley is for the industry or the drafters at large?
I think people see what Saquon did last year and averaged 23 PPR points per game, and they gravitate toward it. Not to mention like how hyped everybody was for Saquon last year as he made this awesome run with Philadelphia. Wasn't even like a huge factor in their Super Bowl win, but the hype around Saquon is what's pushing the public toward taking Saquon at number 1. I'll go Bijan. I love how he was used from week 6 on. He averaged almost 23 PPR points per game. He had a ton of games with, I want to say like 17 touches per game. I can look it up and double check it for you. But the Falcons finally figured out. It took Arthur Smith leaving and it took Zach Robinson putting 2 and 2 together. They figured out to give this guy a lot of the work, and they need to continue doing it. I don't think the offensive line is going to take that big of a step back this year. I know they lost their center. And I know that they're older. They've got one of the older offensive lines in the league. Dude, Bijan's just awesome. And the reason why I've got him at number 1 ahead of Chase is because I'm comfortable with the receivers that will be left for us when we get to the 2-3 turn. It's going to be T. Higgins. It's going to be Ladd McConkey. It might be Rashee Rice getting into that group. There are a lot of good wide receivers that I'm okay with saying, all right, not one of the top 9 guys, but absolutely guys that are top 12 guys. You can have 2 top 12 wide receivers and arguably the best candidate to be the number 1 running back on a per game basis in PPR leagues, all on your fantasy team by taking Bijan. I don't have a problem if you take Ja'Marr Chase first. If you love wide receivers, you want the safety of that position, you think Chase can repeat what he did last year, take Chase first. They're going to be good running backs when you get to the 2-3 turn as well. I'd rather have Bijan, knowing the receivers that are left, I'm going to like better than the running backs that are left.
Oh, I couldn't disagree more with that based on the running back talent that's available versus
who do you see
talent
there at the 2-3 turn?
Oh, I mean, just looking at the Fantasy Pros ADP, 25 is Kyron Williams, 27 is Chase Brown. You want to go, a little bit before that, it's Jonathan Taylor and Bucky Irving, which we tend to see in that range. Like, I would much rather have Chase and Kyron and Chase Brown than Bijan and McConkey and Rashee Rice.
Okay, so I think it's a great point, and CBS ADP is pretty similar. Bucky Irving's 25th or 23rd highest ADP. His ADP is 26th, if that makes any sense. Kyron Williams, Jonathan Taylor, Chase Brown, they're all there, but so are JSN and T. Higgins for what that's worth. McConkey might make it there. So let's just say at the 2-3 turn, you're going to go with 1 receiver and 1 running back, and therefore you're not really playing that game. You don't care who's available at the 2-3 turn. So then you just say, all right, I want my best player available at 101, not giving a crap about 24 and 25. You're going Bijan or you're going Chase?
Chase.
I think in that case, Chase makes a little bit more sense, but I would add, how many receivers are you starting? How many flexes are you starting?
Yeah.
Format obviously matters. If this is a non-PPR or half PPR league, there is no conversation. It's Bijan.
Yeah. Okay.
No conversation.
Okay. So I don't know that we need to spend too much time on them. Bijan was RB4, tied for RB4 per game last year. He's tied with RB3. Sorry, tied as RB3 in full PPR with Derrick Henry. And hopefully the Falcons stay very run heavy like they were at the end of last year. I guess final question here. Are you worried about Atlanta's offense? They, I think, were 13th in points per game last year. Are you worried about them having a bad year offensively?
Again, taking into account who they played, the 3 games that Michael Penix started, they averaged over 32 points per game.
They will also play the Panthers twice, the Saints twice. The Bucs defense is pretty good, so that could be tough, but we've seen Bijan play well against Tampa. I will have a full grade for what I think of their schedule. I don't think it's going to be so bad. It's not a first place schedule. It's not going to be bad that we're going to say, oh, we better watch out for Bijan here. Bijan's schedule is not going to be a deterrent to drafting Bijan.
I expect him to be average.
Just
right around 15th is fair. Yes.
Right. Just real quick on Ja'Marr Chase, just so we don't shortchange him. Heath, what is it about Jahmyr Chase that separates him, that makes him number one for you?
Well, yeah, I think it's less like that seems like an easier argument because he just got 127 passes for 1,700 yards and 17 touchdowns. And we thought before he did that, he might be the best wide receiver in football. He has Joe Burrow. He's on a team with a terrible defense. The question more is like, why is he not number one? And it's just how much off of those, like it was a very abnormal year in terms of scoring 17 touchdowns. And how much does that regress? If he does what he did last year, then he should be the number one pick. I don't really in the projections have anybody that close to him.
Who is close? Wow. Who's number two?
Like Lamb's a point per game behind him. So maybe that's close, but it doesn't seem as close when you look at the wide receiver 20 through 40 and they're all separated by 1 point per game. But then there's another point after Lamb before you get to anybody else in my projections. So he's two points per game better than any wide receiver not named Lamb.
Okay. So, and then on top of that, we've talked about this already, Adam, that we all seem to have a tier of somewhere between 7 and 9 wide receivers that we put on this shelf ahead of everybody else at that position. And it's not even close. And Chase leads that group. And so if you're a fantasy drafter that wants to get in on those 7 to 9 wide receivers, then I think you really do have to lean toward Chase. I just wouldn't expect him, just like with Saquon, I wouldn't expect him to repeat what he did last year. But I think he's got, if I had to put a percentage on it, like maybe there's a 40% chance he repeats versus Saquon, who I'd say has like a 15% chance to repeat what he did last year.
You're saying repeat the stay in the same range numbers wise, or repeat as number one?
Repeat as far as points per game is where my mind's at.
Well, yeah, I mean that's obviously a tougher ask. He's the only receiver ever to go 1,717 touchdowns, and he's a Triple Crown winner with his 4 of those guys in NFL history. Like it's hard,
but
it's hard to do that. I think the case would be is like, can he get to the numbers that you're looking at from the projection standpoint, which is a slight downgrade, but it's still amazing. And so like that's what I'm hoping for, is that he's in the range, not exactly the same level of production.
Well, you'd be thrilled with 20 points per game, wouldn't you?
I'm sorry, Dave?
You'd be thrilled with 20 points per game.
Yeah, I mean, as we talked about last week, and I think anytime you're taking a player in the first round and they're giving you that level of production, so it's a slight decrease from what he did last year, but he's still over that plateau, sure.
Right.
Adam will call him a bust, but yeah.
Yeah. I my argument against Chase, if I had to make one, would be T. Higgins. And typically when you see a wide receiver finish as the number one overall wide receiver, they don't have a running mate that good. And so in the last 9 seasons, there have been 19 pairs of wide receivers who have finished both of them in the top 16. In full PPR, I don't think we've ever had one of those guys finish as wide receiver 1 overall. You know where Higgins finished last year? He finished as wide receiver 17. So, I mean, Tyreek. So sorry, Tyreek Hill was almost one of those. But Jahmyr Chase basically had the best season for a wide receiver that had a running mate as good as T. Higgins. In the last decade, basically. But Jordy Nelson is basically the gold standard there. I don't remember if it was a Randall Cobb or Devontae Adams season, but Higgins finished as wide receiver 2 overall in full PPR, wide receiver 1 in non-PPR, with another receiver having a huge year for the Packers. But usually the number one guy is miles ahead of everyone on his team. And remember, T. Higgins missed 5 games last year.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just look at the games Higgins played, Chase was unbelievable in those games. Wide receiver 1 per game kind of, stats in those games. So whatever.
Well, his best game came with Higgins out.
The Baltimore game. But even including that, or even with that factored in, he was on pace for even better numbers than his full season. 128 catches, 1,771 yards, 18 touchdowns on 177 targets with T. Higgins. Okay. So Chase is great. Let's go to number 3 in the consensus rankings. It's Justin Jefferson, who finished as wide receiver 6 per game last year. It is a little deceiving because 2 guys who were ahead of him were Chris Godwin and Rashee Rice. And then he was basically tied with Puka Nacua and T. Higgins per game. So he was almost wide receiver 2 per game, Justin Jefferson. Unfortunately, it goes down as wide receiver 6 per game. but very, very close. Jamie, your thoughts on Justin Jefferson? I was surprised looking at the consensus rankings that he was wide receiver 2, personally, third overall.
I mean, it's a wild card with the quarterback situation, right? Because J.J. McCarthy could be as good or better than Sam Darnold. I would hope he's better, for what I'm expecting for Jefferson and Addison if there's no suspension, and Hawkinson, a year removed from his ACL. But there's clearly a scenario unfolding where McCarthy runs a little more, doesn't have the same success throwing the ball. Jefferson maybe doesn't have as much, high-end production as, let's say, CeeDee Lamb or Puka or Neighbors, any of those guys that are going to be right behind him. But then you go back to what Kevin O'Connell's quarterbacks have done. There's the Josh Dobbs games, there's the Nick Mullins games, there's the obviously Sam Darnold and the resurrection that he had there, and clearly what he did with Kirk Cousins. So you're hoping that JJ McCarthy comes in and can keep this generational talent. And starting to hear, I think somebody did an all decade team, I think, or something recently. I don't remember what it was. He was on the same roster as Calvin Johnson and Randy Moss and Terrell Owens. He was the fourth receiver of that group. This kid is special. And,
it was the all century team, the quarter century team.
Quarter century team, yeah. So he's amazing, and he's thrived with different quarterbacks, and he's thrived in the system to such a level that it's hard to overlook. So I have no problem if Lamb is drafted ahead of him. Lamb obviously was amazing 2023 with a healthy Dak Prescott, and I hope Dak is back. And however you think of George Pickens and maybe taking away from Lamb, I go back and forth with those two guys myself. So I haven't really completely finalized that Jefferson should be ahead of Lamb, but it's just so hard to bet against what Justin Jefferson has done, what Kevin O'Connell's system has done and produced, and what my expectations are for JJ McCarthy, which is to come in and kind of thrive in the system, even though he may not be the most polished prospect coming out of Michigan. Still a lot of questions to be answered about him as a passer, but I'm extremely confident in the coach, the system, and the player.
Well, I'll ask a broader question because we're already at 32 minutes, so I know we're not going to have time to go super in depth on every one of these players. So if 1 and 2 are Bijan and Chase, in some order for you guys, and consensus it's Bijan 1, then Chase 2. You got Jefferson, Barkley, Lamb at 3, 4, 5. Jefferson had 102 catches last year, 103 catches last year. Barkley had 33 in 16 games. Lamb had 101 in 15 games. With Dak Prescott, just the Dak Prescott games, the first 7 games of the year before Prescott got hurt in the 8th game of the year, he's on pace for 109 catches. So, Dave, how do you kind of balance that, looking at Jefferson, Saquon, Lamb at 3, 4, 5, and going, might be a 70 catch difference here between the wide receivers and the running back?
In a full PPR league, you want to gravitate toward that. The only way a running back can come back from that is by scoring 10 more touchdowns or, having a ton more total yards than the wide receivers get, which is what Saquon did in his amazing year last year. But it's tough to fathom him doing that again. It's easy to see Justin Jefferson being a high volume receiver with good production. Jahmyr had 9 games last year with 20 plus PPR points. Jefferson had 8. You're counting on Jefferson to try and keep that going again this year with JJ McCarthy. So far, the reports on McCarthy are positive. You read any beat reporter that's watched them in minicamp, and it's just minicamp. But McCarthy is slinging it. He's attacking the middle of the field. There's velocity on his throws. These are the things that we want to see. If he's got good command of this O'Connell offense, I'm kind of living where Jamie is on this. You trust the scheme. You trust the play caller. You hope the quarterback is at least on the level of Sam Darnold. We should see Justin Jefferson have another huge year. And so it feels a little safe to take him as the third guy off the board. I don't need to take that risk with Saquon taking a big step back. We've seen that happen to him before when he's had a lot of work. When he's had over 350 touches in a year, his numbers regress the following year. We've seen that twice now from him. CeeDee Lamb with Pickens, man, there's going to be an effect there. We've seen Jefferson play with Jordan Addison being a red zone threat. Guess what? He's still awesome. So I'm happy to take Justin Jefferson third.
All right, we'll take a break and finish up with Barkley and Lamb at 4 and 5, and we'll be right back. And obviously, we'll do the rest of the top 12. We'll be right back on FFT.
Here we go. The 2025 CBS Sports NFL schedule is here. 18 glorious Sundays.
He's got his receiver touchdown.
Filled with rematches.
Oh, the play of the year.
And rivalries.
Touchdown, Bengals.
Plus, plenty of superstar showdowns. And an epic matchup between the Chiefs and Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Clear your Sundays beginning September 7th for the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus.
Saquon Barkley is 4th in our consensus rankings in PPR. Heath, give me 30 seconds on Saquon Barkley. Up to 30 seconds.
He would be the number 1 player without a doubt if it wasn't for concerns about him having way too many touches last year and being 28 years old. And is there risk of a breakdown like we have seen from a relevant percentage of running backs who have touched the ball that much in the past? But if you take those concerns away, and one of the reasons I think that you might favor a running back over a wide receiver in that range, you talked about the receptions that are certainly going to favor the wide receivers. If you talk about just total yards, there have been 36, I think, in the last 10 years, NFL players that have had 1,700 yards, so played 17 games and averaged 100 yards per game just from scrimmage. And 75% of them are running backs. Like running backs just get more yards, and generally running backs score more touchdowns. And Barkley's in one of the best situations you could imagine for producing a lot of yards and touchdowns.
That's a great point. Jamie, give me a quick 30 seconds on CeeDee Lamb. And by the way, speaking of yards, total yards, CeeDee Lamb has been on pace for, I think, 79 or more rushing yards in 4 of his 5 NFL seasons. It's an underrated aspect of CeeDee Lamb's game. Jamie, 30 seconds on Lamb.
Dak hopefully back at 100% and plays the entire season. You saw what that was for the back end of the 2023 season. You mentioned what he was on pace for in 2024 before Dak suffered the hamstring injury and missed half the year. The addition of George Pickens is probably the best running mate that he's had since, I guess, Amari Cooper, maybe? I don't remember who the other guy was when Lamb started his tenure with Dallas. But clearly, since he's had this breakout, year plus, this is definitely the best running mate that he's had. Although Brandon Cooks did have 7 or 8 touchdowns in 2023, so Pickens can certainly score a bunch and still not impact CeeDee Lamb in a way that it's a tremendous negative. So again, Lamb can easily be the number 2 wide receiver off the board. He could easily be the number 3 overall pick off the board, depending on how you view Bijan or Barkley, however those guys. But I think he's a top 5 overall pick and should be a top 4 overall selection, factoring in Bijan with the other 2 receivers.
Okay. Yeah. If you want to show Thomas, one of the things that it's held Lamb back a little bit, and that's funny saying that because he finishes number 1 wide receiver in 2023, is that Dak Prescott's missed 14 games over the last 3 years. But here are the fantasy points per game for CeeDee Lamb with a healthy Dak Prescott. So that is removing week 5 in 2020 when Dak left with an injury. It's removing week 9 last year when Dak left with an injury. You can see the sample sizes on the bottom. But over the last 3 years, it's 18.3 points per game, 23.8, and 19.2. And I would look at that 18.3. He had a horrible week 1. Prescott missed the next, I want to say, 6 games. And then after that week 1, like the last 11 games of the year, Lamb averaged 19.4 or 19.6 fantasy points per game. So I could make a pretty easy case that his floor is 19 PPR fantasy points per game, which is really good. However, all of this is before George Pickens, right? So that needs to be mentioned here. It doesn't seem like any of you are all that bothered by it.
It's hard for me with Pickens. Like, I think he's really good at what he does and could really help Dak out. But he's, first off, not played with anybody like CeeDee Lamb. And he's still never been a really consistent high target earner. I just don't think George Pickens is the type of the guy that goes out on the field and all of a sudden you start throwing the ball to him instead of Lamb. Pickens is the guy you take advantage of the matchup downfield when it's there. And maybe he gets 6 targets a game. And they were throwing those 6 targets a game to a couple other guys that weren't as good as George Pickens. But I don't think George Pickens is the type of guy that you worry about infringing on an alpha number 1's target share.
Okay. Let's move on to.
And it is just, in looking at it, like, is Pickens any better or worse than Jordan Addison? Is Pickens any better or worse than T. Higgins? Like, all these guys have another player.
Yeah, but I think CeeDee Lamb, I think I would say CeeDee Lamb is a great player. He's not as good as Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase.
That is fair. And again, Higgins is obviously better than Pickens, and I would say Addison as a talent is probably better than Pickens. But
Yep.
you get the point. Like, there's somebody else that these guys have to share with. And then, again, the sliding scale of, okay, is Puka's situation better than Lamb's situation?
I keep making I'm sorry. I keep making the case about Jefferson, though, just to your point. Nobody seems to factor it in. I feel like he had his targets were down last year, and his target per route run rate was down, and it was only half the year did TJ Hawkinson play. So, yeah.
And yet he was still an amazing fantasy.
He was amazing, but
I think
number two.
And this is where we're telling you publicly, as we always do, how we feel about this. This is when you're making your draft, what decision you have to make in regards to, okay, do I buy into Dak, Lamb, Pickens as a negative, Dak's injury history as a negative, Dak coming off an injury as a negative, versus Jefferson, what he's done, the guys he shares the field with, and Addison and Hawkinson, and an unproven quarterback. Like, there's huge questions. There's huge questions, and this may be why you pivot to Bijan at 2 if Chase goes 1, or Barkley still there, or Gibbs still there, or what I would do. And, we had this discussion, like, okay, you build out your first couple rounds, and this is where ADP comes in, because you can't clearly predict it entirely. But okay, if I do this with the receiver in round 1, and as Dave said, there's 9, I could probably say 10 if, for me at least, Drake London. But like, there's those guys, like these guys, I want to get one of them. But if I don't, okay, that round 3 receiver range starts to get a little questionable, especially if you're, like 27, 28, 29. Rice is now gone. Higgins is gone. JSN is, starts to get where the tipping point is for me, at least. Like, I would want to guarantee myself the opportunity to take a Jefferson or a Lamb, maybe more so, just again, if you're building out with those running backs, they're going to be there versus the receivers.
And I should probably say I do, like, I maybe I already said it, but I have Lamb a point ahead of Jefferson. So
you did.
Like, I do think Lamb should be ahead of Jefferson.
Okay. Yeah. Right now, I just want to bring this stuff up because these guys are great, and but just I love this show, by the way. Right now, I love being able to spend all this time on 1 or 2 players. I think to bring up all the research that we've done and all these different angles, and maybe the people listening go, "Oh, I never thought about that," or "Oh, just reinforces something I already thought about." So we're going to do today, calling an audible here. We're just going to do the top 6, and we'll end with Jahmyr Gibbs, talk about him, and then we'll do. So we had 4 shows planned for this week, and the 1 through 12 was going to be today. 13 through 24 was going to be tomorrow, Tuesday. But we're going to do those 2 topics over 4 days. So I think we'll be able to spend more time instead of me rushing you guys along like I always do. So let's go to Jahmyr Gibbs. And yeah, we know if David Montgomery won the lottery, Dave, maybe Jahmyr Gibbs would be the consensus 101 because he's just incredible when Montgomery's out. But when Montgomery's there, it's not, this might be a little bit rich of a ranking at number 6. Might be. So what do you say about that criticism of Jahmyr Gibbs?
Adam, in 14 games with David Montgomery last year, Jahmyr Gibbs averaged 18.9 PPR points per game. He is absolutely in the conversation of being a top 6 pick, if not a top 4 pick. I'm going to bank on his upside and his usage going up. I think there's more for him to accomplish there as a pass catcher. And because this offense, just on paper, talent-wise, what they have, it's impossible for defenses to totally focus on the run game in Detroit. They've got to have their safeties back because of not just Jamison Williams' speed, but also what Laporta can do, what St. Brown can do. Even Tim Patrick is respected, at least, by opposing defensive coordinators. Not that they're going to double Tim Patrick, but you know what I'm saying. There are threats that are out there that are going to force defense to say, okay, we need to really take it easy and not necessarily stack the box or blitz Jared Goff time after time. they've got to be a lot more selective with those decisions. That plays into Jahmyr Gibbs' favor. I think his workload could potentially rise. I also think the Lions will be in more competitive games this year than they were last year. This is a player I want to have on my team. Just absolutely ascending, can do it all. Montgomery's getting older. He might be relegated to a touchdown or bust type of fantasy running back who doesn't get the same type of work week in and week out. It's just easier for an offensive coordinator that's not as talented as Ben Johnson to lean on Jahmyr Gibbs because of the talent that he's shown the world over his first 2 seasons. I'll take him ahead of Saquon Barkley.
And just again to offer where I'm different, I think I'm the low guy on Gibbs at the 7th pick, and the only concern I have on the low guy on the Lions basically is how much does the absence of Ben Johnson, the absence of Ragnow matter? Like, a big reason that Jahmyr Gibbs was as incredible as he was last year is he scored 20 touchdowns on the team that scored more points than anybody else. And I think there's probably a little bit of offensive regression coming for the Lions. So I'm not quite as excited about taking Gibbs that high.
I think the one thing that's interesting with your Lions take, and it makes sense, again, they'll change the offense coordinator, change the center. Everything that they did was such a high level last year. Plus the defense was awful at the end of the season, and they had to be. So I don't want to say more offensive minded, because I think every team should be offensive minded, but you get the point. Like, they had to, sort of compensate for their lack of defensive players who were there, especially some of the stars. Like, this is the one guy, as good as St. Brown has been, as good as the rookie season was for Laporta, like, his arrow, I think, is still pointing up. And there's still room to get better if, to Dave's point, they do sort of maybe relegate Montgomery to somewhat more of a specialist role. I don't see that, dramatically happening, but it could. And there's another wild card. It's not just the loss of those 2 guys. It's what does, John Morton do? And what does, as the new play caller there? And is it a benefit to Gibbs? Or is it the other way? Is it a negative to Gibbs that maybe they don't want to put more work on his plate and they want to continue this balance of these 2 guys sharing the backfield? And as we saw, Adam points this out all the time. In the beginning part of the season, Montgomery was the better pass catcher, from a production standpoint.
So pretty much even. Gibbs had more targets. I've always, I'm sorry, I wanted to clarify, because I've always been giving this stat, and I think I might be giving the wrong stat, because I've been giving the first 14 games, but I probably should be doing the first 13 games because Montgomery got hurt in that 14th game. But in the first 13 games before Montgomery got hurt, they had the same amount of touches. Montgomery had 2 more carries, I think, and Gibbs had 2 more catches. It's pretty crazy. The same amount of, but it's not that many touches. It's a pace of 233 carries and 44 catches for Jahmyr Gibbs. That is not what you want from a top 6 overall pick. Heath has him 7th. Dave and Jamie have him top 5 because we respect how good he is with those touches and how many touchdowns he scores. But just that number, like, if you want to be nervous, that's why 233 carries, 44 touches. That's what he was on pace. 44 catches. That's what he was on pace for. Almost identical numbers to David Montgomery's pace. So that's just what I wanted to bring up. Heath,
it's a fair concern, if you're worried about Gibbs and the, not living up to, you just saw, if you're watching on YouTube, the sports line projection of the number 1 running back that they have, ahead of Bijan and ahead of Barkley. That's pretty lofty, expectations given what those other 2 guys showed last year as well. But you also have the wild card of Montgomery's missed time each of the last 2 years, and Gibbs has dominated in those games.
That's the
Absolutely
contingency
dominated.
upside.
Yeah.
And I think the big question for me is that 56 catches, because he was on pace for 44 last year when Montgomery was healthy.
Yeah, I'll say he can get over 50 catches again. And he was 10th in targets per game at running back last year. He was the most consistent running back for fantasy managers last year, 13 of 17 games with at least 15 PPR points.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so that, just to get a glimpse inside my crazy mind, do I include that Buffalo game with Montgomery? He played 30% of the snaps. That's low, but it's not that low for him. Montgomery usually plays about 40% of the snaps. So you could include the game, whatever. It's not, doesn't change things that much. The point is, Gibbs is a different player when Montgomery's on the field. He has been for the first 2 seasons. He's been a different player when Montgomery's on the field. We're hoping that they recognize, man, this guy is so special. Get the ball in his hands more often.
But even if they don't, I'm just going to go back to the very first number I spewed, which is 18.9, which is still really damn good.
Great, but he's going to have to score a touchdown a game. He's going to have to average a touchdown a game.
Yeah, I think this guy's capable of doing that.
Capable of it. Yeah, it's tough to bank on that, right? When you're splitting goal line carries evenly, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's the argument against him. I'm playing devil's advocate. I mean, I think he deserves to be that high. Heath has him 7th. I don't think he's going any lower than that. Can't wait to talk about Puka Nacua. At 8th overall, he is the most underrated player.
Is he your favorite?
He might be my wide receiver 2.
Wow.
So what's your top 6?
Yeah, I don't know. Do I have to do this?
Yes.
Are you not worried about Adams at all?
Up there. You love McCaffrey.
I am worried about Adams, but I think that we kind of forget how good Cooper Kupp was last year until the last 3 games of the season. Cooper Kupp had a combined 9 targets, but there was this stretch where they both came back against Minnesota. They both came back in the same game after missing a big chunk of the first half of the season. And Kupp averaged weeks 8 through 14. Kupp averaged 9 targets per game and scored 18 PPR fantasy points per game. Nacua averaged 10 targets per game and scored 20.5 PPR fantasy points per game. Adams is 32 years old. Puka is entering his prime. Like I said, the 2nd highest yards per route run for any wide receiver over the last 12 years. And he was elite in that. He was really good in that as a rookie as well. I just think he's amazing. The touchdowns are weird. So, if he just scores 10 touchdowns, it's just going to crush it. I'm not all that worried about Devontae Adams. My top 6 would be Ja'Marr Chase in full PPR. Ja'Marr Chase 1, Bijan Robinson 2, Christian McCaffrey 3, Puka 4, Lamb 5, Jefferson 6.
It's really interesting, though, just like, and I'm not even arguing against it, but the fact that we're more worried about Saquon Barkley because he stayed healthy for 20 games last year and had too many touches than we are about Christian McCaffrey, who missed most of last year hurt and has missed a lot more games over his career due to injury than Barkley.
I wouldn't say I'm worried about – I wouldn't say it like that I'm more worried about Barkley than McCaffrey. I just think Barkley had a perfect season last year. He averaged 5.7 yards per carry, I think. Don't see that happening again. He's not a huge factor in the passing game. Just looking at their entire careers, McCaffrey laps Saquon Barkley. It's just not even close. So if I'm getting injury risk out of there, even with how great Barkley was last year, that was the height of Saquon Barkley. What did he average last year? 23 points per game?
23.5, I think.
Yeah, the height of Christian McCaffrey is actually that's not fair. He's not going to catch 119 balls again or anything.
No.
But
I've got Saquon at
more upside to me.
22.2 for Saquon last year.
Yeah, I think McCaffrey has more upside, and non-injury floor, I think McCaffrey has a higher floor than Barkley.
And would you really say that he's lapped him?
Yes. In his career, yes, I would, personally. When he's been on the field as a fantasy asset. Like Barkley, before last year, I think Barkley was one of the most overrated players. You just look at it, like he never lived up to that rookie year. He was horrible.
McCaffrey's played how many seasons?
Who?
McCaffrey's played how many seasons?
8.
7, 8?
He's played one more year than Barkley.
One more year than Barkley?
Mm-hmm. And has 1,300 more yards, which seems pretty much like 1 year.
He gets hurt.
2 of those 7 were definitely in Barkley's favor.
His rookie year and last year?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. Lap.
Actually, no. What was Barkley's rookie year? No, they were tied that year.
No. His rookie year versus McCaffrey's rookie year.
Right. McCaffrey wasn't fully unleashed his rookie year.
Okay, but in Barkley's best season until last year, no, his best season overall, he averaged 24 points per game. McCaffrey averaged 23.8 that year. They were 1 and 2 overall. Okay. Hey, we got something to show here. Let's get this.
There we go.
Get something good here. What do we got? Look at that. Champions. I see the word champions there, Jamie.
Right.
What are we looking at?
This was the sectional championship for our Boca Raton Little League 13U All-Stars. And what an unbelievable day it was Saturday. We had to win 2 games to advance to the state tournament, so we're going to states. And the boys played great. This was the second game. We were down 7-3 in the 4th inning of 7. Had to rally back and win the game 9-7. It was a very proud moment for me. My son drove in the game-winning RBI. We still scored another run on top of it, but he put us ahead 8-7. And the entire team really contributed in the second game. First time that we've been trailing. So this is our 5th game together. First time that we've been trailing, and just amazing to see them, come back and to win the game was special to advance to the state tournament. So now we go to states on Friday, and it's a 8-team tournament. So we'll see if we can win there. And we're hoping that our best pitcher, Joey Wagner. I could say a lot about the entire team, but our stud pitcher, Joey Wagner. You heard me mention him a couple times on the show. Appreciate you guys, talking about it. So, and getting some responses, via social media. So our best pitcher, Joey Wagner, he may not be with us this weekend. We're trying to make a last second plea. He's got another commitment with another team, but we're trying to make a last second plea for Joey to come pitch with us. Cause again, just so awesome watching this kid pitch, 16 and 2/3 innings. He has 40 strikeouts in the 16 plus innings. I mean, he's just been absolutely dominant, and has a chance for Little League immortality if he's with us for this state tournament run. So I think we have a good chance to win it. I know I was a little bit pessimistic going into the district tournament when we came out of the district tournament, and the kids got on me about that. So I think we have a really good chance to win it. I hope Joey's with us, and hope the rest of the team shows up and does what they're capable of doing, because it's been a fun ride so far. Heath knows as a coach, and I know Dave and Adam have had their experiences with their kids. When you get a good group of kids and a great group of parents, it makes everything so much better. And this group has been so amazing. Really, really enjoying this run. Hope it continues. And I hope our whole team is there with us. So, appreciate you guys, bringing it up and showing this. And I'm glad you didn't show the other photo. Up there it is.
Yes.
That's great.
Was that your punishment for being pessimistic?
You got to give a little play-by-play. What are we looking at for the listeners?
So the first photo you showed was the entire team photo under the scoreboard, and the whole team posing. This was afterwards. They got me pretty good. They're like, "Hey, we got to talk to you real quick." The other coach, one of the coaches pulled me aside. The other coach snuck up behind and dumped the ice water shower, Gatorade, bath that you would typically see, but thankfully it wasn't Gatorade. And it was cold, but it was worth it. It was a hot day, as we talked about with the temperature. So I enjoyed it. I hope to get another one this coming weekend. And appreciate you guys again that have asked about it on social media. And hopefully we keep it going for one more run. And then after that, who knows? We get a regional tournament in North Carolina and a national tournament in California if we keep this going.
Wow.
Okay, I have something to share with you guys. Did some quick math. Over their careers, I've got Saquon Barkley, 18.3 PPR points per game. Christian McCaffrey, 22.1. That's a pretty big difference.
That's not a lap.
That's a lap.
That's a lap. That's a quarter of a lap.
A lap would be like Dan laps you in tennis.
Yeah.
Man, they might cancel my tennis match tonight because of the heat, and I'm going to be pissed.
Thought you were playing at some indoor facility.
No, it's a road game today. We have a road match
Wow.
out in the heat.
No one's coming to drop a bucket of water over your head if you win.
Hydrate.
Well, I will. All right. Thank you so much. 7 through 12 in the PPR consensus rankings tomorrow. We will talk to you then. See you later.